Morning folks, and welcome back. I've set my baker tent up in my garden. We're still in lockdown due to this coronavirus, so I've just had to make the best of a bad lot, really. I'm fortunate enough to have a garden, and I have somewhere where I can set up, so all is not lost. There are obviously challenges to you know, filming in your garden. It's not only me that likes to enjoy my garden, I have neighbours as well. I've picked the worst day of the weekend to film, which is the opposite to what I'd normally do. I'd normally pick the driest, nicest, sunniest day for better filming conditions. But to reduce the chance of background noises, I've picked the worst weather day. It's pretty dreary, it's been raining on and off all morning, but that might just work in my favour. I've lit a fire under the porch of the baker tent to protect it from the rain, because I'm going to be doing some cooking this morning. I've got my big Dutch oven, because I'm going to be cooking pizzas. For my bases, I'm going to use exactly the same dough I use for baking bread. So if you watch my bread video I did, cooking bread in a Dutch oven, it's exactly the same recipe. I'll put it in the description box below, but I'll talk through it as I go. In this bag here, I've got 2 pounds of flour. I'm working in pounds just because it's easier for me to remember the recipe that way. Basically, it's 2 pounds, 3 ounces, and a pint, and it just makes it easier for me to remember. So I've got 2 pounds of flour, that's 1 pound of bread flour, and 1 pound of plain flour. There's also some salt in here. Now, normally, the recipe calls for an ounce of salt. I think that's too much. I think it makes it too salty, and in my experience, it stops the yeast from doing its job properly. So I use about half a teaspoon of salt, so that's in there as well. I've got an ounce of yeast, so that equates to 4 of these little packets that you can buy of dried yeast. Each one of these is 7 grams and an ounce is about 28 grams. I've got the same again of sugar, so that's an ounce of sugar and a pint of water. That water needs to be warm, just tepid, not too hot that you can't put your fingers in. So I've just got some water on to warm up by the fire, and we can get started. I've also got my Dutch oven over here next to the fire just to warm up. I'm going to prove my dough in here, so I want this to be nice and warm, and I'm just rotating it around to get the temperature up inside. This is a really big Dutch oven. It's a 12-quart Petromax FD12, big enough to bake a 12-inch pizza. In this cup I've got the yeast and the sugar. The water is now warm, so I'm just going to add some to that yeast and sugar. The yeast will start to feed off the sugar now, and this will all start to sort of froth up. But that's good, it's doing its thing then. So I'm just going to put this to one side. Right, so I'm going to do most of my mixing in the bag. I like to do this for this first sort of initial stage when it's really sticky, the dough, and then take it out and finish it off and then knead it on a board. But it does save a lot of that dough getting stuck to your fingers if you can start it off in the bag. This is a large batch of dough. This is enough to make quite a large loaf of bread. I don't need to use all of this for one pizza. This is enough for several pizza bases. So I will divide it up, and I'm going to make one pizza this morning, and the rest of them my family and I are having for dinner tonight. So it will get used up then. Right, the yeast and sugar and water have started to react, and that's almost doubled in size in the cup there. So I'm going to start to pour this in just a little bit at a time, and then using my spoon I'm just going to start to combine it, make a sort of well, pour it in the middle, and just bring the flour in, mix it. Right, so that's all of the yeast and sugar. And don't forget we've got the rest of the water to go in as well. Don't put it all in straight away because flours vary a bit, and some flours require a bit more water than others. And now I'm going to start mixing it in the bag, just squeezing it through the outside of the bag and getting all that flour from the corners to mix in. Right, well I've got that mostly mixed, or as good as I can, in the bag. I'm going to turn this out onto this board now. I'm just going to put a bit of flour on first so it doesn't stick straight away. Just dust it. And then we'll get this finished off on here. Get all the bits out of the corners. There are obviously loads of different dough recipes, bread recipes out there. When I did my bread video, I was inundated with comments on with suggestions for different bread recipes. Yeah, there are loads out there, you know, use whatever really. This is just a recipe I like, it works, and I think the bread is really nice, so that's what I always use. Once you've got a recipe you like, you tend to just stick with it. There's all sorts of like no knead versions, and you know, sourdough, and there's all sorts. Use whatever. If you do end up making it too wet, don't worry, you can have more flour. It's always worth having a little bit extra. I've got a bag of plain flour here, so if that was the case I could just add a bit more. You're basically aiming for a firm dough that doesn't stick to your hands. I mean, it's sticking a little bit here because it's still a bit wet in places, but you want to be able to work it and knead it without it sticking to your fingers and everything. This is obviously a lot easier in your kitchen. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that for its mix. Now comes the fun part. Time to knead it. And basically what you're doing is really working it. Turn this way so I can get some purchase on it, and you're basically just going to keep folding it, rolling it, folding it, rolling it, and just giving it a bit of a hard time. Take out all your frustrations. Take that, COVID. You want to do this for a good 5 minutes, because that really puts stretch into it and gives it that nice stretchy bready structure when you break the bread open or you bite into your pizza. Right, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to stick that into the Dutch oven now to prove. So in here I've got a trivet, a cast iron trivet, just to keep the pizzas off the bottom of the Dutch oven, which is going to get really hot. I don't want it to burn like my bread did. And I've just got a baking sheet. This is actually the bottom of a cake tin, one of those with the snap side kind of thing, you know, that snaps. I'm going to use that as my baking sheet. But while the dough is proving, I don't want it to stick to this, so I'm just going to line this with a bit of greaseproof paper, pop the dough on to prove, and what we're aiming for is for it to double in size. While the dough is proving, I'm just going to chop up a red onion. It's going to be one of my toppings. Right, let's take a look at this dough. Oh, there we go. It's definitely risen. I've put the Dutch oven over the fire and loaded the lid up with coals just to get it warming up. I want that nice and hot for baking this, and I'm now going to knock the wind back out of this dough. It's obviously full of air now as it's expanded, so kneading time again. Right, I said before this will make several pizza doughs, pizza bases, so I'm just going to divide this up now into 8. And each one of them will be a pizza. Then I'm just going to dust my board and then start rolling this out. Now I like to part bake my pizza bases. I give them just a couple of minutes in the oven by themselves without the toppings or anything on, and it just makes it easier to handle them. Once you've made the pizza, you can, you know, transfer it into the Dutch oven much more easily if the base is already a little bit rigid. Also at home, if you're doing this, you can make up all your pizza bases in advance and freeze them, and they'll keep for, you know, months in the freezer. And then whenever you fancy pizza, you haven't got to go through the whole dough making procedure. You can just take your pre-prepared bases out, make your pizzas, and you're away. Right, let's get this pizza made up then. I'm just putting passata on the top, just straight out of the carton or jar, however you buy it. I'm then going to put a little bit of dried onion and dried garlic. I'm then going in with cheese. Now I know this is a bit controversial as to whether you cheese first or topping first. Well, I'm a cheese first kind of guy. That's just grated mozzarella, red onions, and double salami. I've got salami from Naples and salami from Milan here. Bit of pepper, mixed herbs, and some chili flakes. I don't know how well you can see that, but I've tried to arrange the wood around the outside of the firebowl here, just to keep the heat at the outside rather than directly underneath it. It also gives you a space in the middle where you can collect up embers and coals to put on the lid to get that top heat. Well, that was gorgeous. I don't care what anybody says, pizza always tastes better when cooked with fire. I'm going to get things cleared up here, and I'm going to take this last slice in for Tom. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.